Okay, now you're live.
All righty. I'd like to thank everybody for coming back to Wednesday Night Live. I took a couple weeks off. Um, I forgot one, and maybe I forgot both of them. I don't even know what the second week excuse was. But it came back to it. So tonight, I want to stop and address current events. We've been watching the news. Everybody's seen big pieces of the country on fire. We've seen division, and we've seen anger, and we've seen some foolish behavior on lots of sides, and don't know how to respond to it. Quite frankly, it's not happening here. And so I've been watching the news and debating, what's going on. I don't understand what's happening in Minneapolis. I don't understand what's happening in Portland and Eugene, for that matter. I've spent 30 of my 50 years in Douglas County, Coos County, some of rural Clackamas. That probably gets me over 30 if I count that. Living in small towns, living in places like this. I don't understand the issues of race. Period. I don't. I grew up here. I began to pose questions about that and realized I've got the numbers of 2 black men in my telephone.
Wait, what number am I? 1 or 2?
Frankly, you'd be 2 because the other one works for me,
okay.
and I hired him before I knew him.
Oh, okay, there's that.
So I called DeMond and said, hey, tell me about this. Tell me about racial issues from your perspective, because clearly his perspective is different than mine. So I called him up. He talked to me for well over an hour. Said, hey, here's my experiences, here's what I see, and here's how I think the church can respond to it. And of course, it was important. It was going to Christian Brother. I was like, okay, what is the church's right response to that? So he shared a bunch of stuff with me. I asked him if he'd come down and share that with everybody who's tuning in tonight. I think the church is responsible to respond to the things going on around us. And I think DeMond's got some really good things to say to us. And so I'm going to largely turn him loose on this. I've got a few questions as we go along. Okay. But I think you and the Good Samaritan are probably going to start us off, or maybe you want to start with your own experiences.
Sure. Okay, we can start there. So I know. So first of all, I'm not going to talk for like 2 hours like we did earlier. So I'm going to try to hold a little shorter than that. So one of the first things that I always hear about things like this is, hey, this doesn't really happen. Like this is like a one-off thing. Like are you like this? Are these people exaggerating, or they're just jumping on this? And so what I go to and start to explain in that situation is my own experiences, right? The reason why some of these things ring so true when you're seeing it on television, when you're hearing it, people talk about this, particularly for the black community, is because it's happened to a lot of us, right? So for me, I was telling Eric about a time where I was driving up and down a street in the neighborhood looking for a friend's house and at night, and I couldn't find it. And a police car went by me, and he saw me, and then he turned around and he followed me, and then he pulled me over. And then as I began to question, why are you pulling me over? Like I haven't done anything. He took offense to that and grabbed me by my arm and pushed me down on my own car and shoved my arm up my back, and I screamed like a little girl. But it was a terrible experience, and I remember going back to a cop friend of mine a couple of days later who happened to be covering as security at a Whataburger. I don't know if people know what Whataburger is, but there to watch the crowd there, and I began to tell him about my experience. And when I told him the cop he was like, "Oh yeah, we know about him. He's terrible. Stay away from him." So these things happen, and we experience it. And so when, like I said, when we hear it, it echoes it brings back those memories. Like, oh yeah, that happened. That does happen. Like, the racial profiling is real. It's follow to be pulled over to look to see if they can find something on us. And I grew up in Arizona, so I grew up in a bigger city. My wife and I kind of had to have this discussion about it, and she was like, I don't get it. I don't understand. It's like, last time I saw you get pulled over by the cops, you were speeding, and you deserved it. I was like, yeah, I was speeding, and I deserved it. But I've had several other experiences where I did nothing and didn't deserve it, right? So there's a mix. So what that's saying is that there's good and bad. There's good and bad cops out there, and there's things that are just preconceived conceptions about other people that are already just built in. So they're looking for reasons to pull you over, or thinking like, hey, I know something's going on with him, so I'm going to pull him over, type deal. So when we start looking at like the build up to this particular incident, we have to start back with like let me go back further. As a teenager, I remember living in Arizona and having family come down from California over to Arizona from California. And they were like, "Hey man," this was in the early '90s. They were like, "Hey man, if you're gonna drive down to California, man, be careful, stay from the cops. They will rough you up over here. They are not playing. Billy clubs, pistol whip. They're doing this serious business over here." And I was like, "That's crazy. Like, who does that, right?" And then like a couple of years later, they catch these 6 cops beating up Rodney King, and I was like, "Oh, well, this caught on tape. They're all going to jail, except they didn't, right?" So it didn't happen. And then you start seeing like other things happen. Like you start seeing the kid Trayvon Martin, and the guy follows him and he kills this, I think he's a 14-year-old boy, and nothing happens to him, right? Stand your ground. And then we see the gentleman in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is why, it may not be Minneapolis, but which is why it kind of went so bad in Minnesota, is because they had a history of these things happen and nothing coming of it. So in Minneapolis, a guy is reaching for, a few years back, a guy is reaching for his insurance and things like that from his glove box, and he gets shot, right, by the police officer in front of his girlfriend and his child in the car with him. Nothing happens to him, right? So all of a sudden you start to get this feeling that the justice system is not working for you, right? But then something happens this year, and the first thing I noticed is that the young man that was jogging in his neighborhood, and he gets run down and trapped, and then fights for his life and gets shot by these guys. And they had already reported this, that, oh yeah, he was robbing this place and we stood our ground and we shot him. But yet the video shows that like, no, he was going by and you guys grabbed him on purpose, type deal. And that came out. It was like things that would normally not come out was being revealed, right? Then you had the young lady in the park who, the gentleman asked her to, you need to put a leash on your dog. This area you're supposed to have a leash on your dog. And she immediately tells him that she's going to call the police and tell them that I'm fearing for my life from this black man. And she does. She calls in. She gets frantic on the phone to tell the police that. But these are things that we, in the black community, we thought these things going to happen, but we had never seen it, and we were seeing it on live television, right? So that's the buildup. And then all of a sudden, we see this officer take down George Floyd and pin him down, and this man is pleading for his life, begging for his mother, and just to breathe. And the officer had no care in the world about taking this man's life, even though everyone around him, except for those other 3 officers, were telling him like, hey, this man cannot breathe, he's dying. And he didn't care. And I think for Black America, we saw that and we were like, I, I can't believe like this is happening like this, right? But what triggered all these other things is that white America saw that, and it wasn't that the officer had, it wasn't that the officer was pinning him down, just that it was the way he did it, the way he had no second thoughts in his mind about this man's life, right? I heard a poem, said the other day. It was like somebody call the police on the police, right? I need help, and that's the one thing that rang in with a lot of people in America, because all of a sudden that started validating a lot of these things that have happened. So, you hear my little story, but then you start putting all these other things together, and you start seeing like there's a trend of things, and people, they, for the black community, it's hard to say like, yes, we're gonna change it this time. That was terrible. We're gonna fix it this time, when they didn't fix it the last 30 times, right? So there's no equity in there of goodwill. So the marching starts, and that's what we do. We protest, we march, right? And it was such a great thing to see, of many different cultures and races coming through, seeing the effects of that in marching and things like that, right? And then the protest, and then the rioting and things like that started. And then all of a sudden, all of this chaos came out. And then all of a sudden, it became about the looting and the rioting and all these other stuff, and not about the victim, and not about the things going on. And then it began to give talking points about validating, like, well, see, shoot, we can't do anything for these guys. They'll tear everything up. They'll loot everything, and it's really not about that, right? It's not about what side you're on. It's not about Republican or Democrat or white or black. It is about right and wrong, right? And especially as the Christian community that we are, right? We really need to be about what's right and wrong. My favorite scripture growing up as a kid was Romans 12:2, to be not conformed to this world, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove the good and acceptable and perfect will of God, right? It changed, meanings for me through my life growing up, right? But in this situation, I look at it now and I see all the chaos out there, and I'm starting to understand what God is saying, to not be conformed to this world. Like, we have the reason, a lot of, in my opinion, a lot of the reasons why we're here with all these rioting and things like that is it's not just the murder of George Floyd here, but it's also, we have the pandemic going on. We have people lose their jobs, right? We're people, people running out of food. They have nothing. They're losing everything right now, and everything that we depended on, the system. Like, where's my stimulus check? Have I got it yet? Right? You haven't gotten your stimulus check. People are waiting on that. People are waiting on unemployment, but the system is running too slow, right? It's all the things that we depended on. We thought that these things mattered so much, right? We had our faith on that. That was where we conformed to, like, hey, this is the world. The world told us, you follow these things and everything's going to work out for you, right? And God has always said all along, no. You follow me, right? Don't be in the world. Don't be of the world, right? Am I saying that? Yeah. Don't be in the world, don't be of the world. So, or I think it's vice versa. But it's saying, like, don't get yourself wrapped up in your faith in these things, because financial systems fall, right? Presidents will be great, and they'll let you down, right? Your politicians will, your party will, right? Yeah, our family will, right? I let my mom down. And lots of times, right? So we'll let each other down. But if we keep our eyes on Christ, right? This is where we need to be. And if we do that, and we start thinking that way, and start getting away from what the media says how we should act, because nowadays the media tells us how we should react, how we should act to things. You should be appalled at this, or you should be this. You should be angry. You should be standing up for this, or you should be standing up for that, right? And everyone has their agenda, whether it be right or left. They have their agenda, right? We want our agenda to be what Christ says, right? And so if we go back to the Bible and talk about how Jesus did it, right? He talked about the Samaritan, right? He gave that parable about the Samaritan. He said, there was a man who fell to thieves, got roughed up, beat up, money taken, everything, right? And he said, the one good person, I'm paraphrasing all these things because I haven't looked at these scriptures in a while, but one good man came this way, and he was like, no, I can't be bothered. Like, if I come over here with you, somebody might jump me too, right? Another one come by, I would help you, but I'm wearing my Sunday best. I cannot help you right now, so I'm going to keep going too. He crosses and walks the other way. And the man that typically, because of the barriers between their cultures, they're not supposed to even talk to each other. They don't even hang out with each other. They don't deal with each other. The man that would be the least likely to help this man helps him, right? Now, because he is doing what Jesus was telling them to do in the end of this parable was, treat them like you want to be treated. When the disciples were like, hey, just tell me what commandment do I need to follow? What's that top one that I need to follow that's the best, right? And Jesus was like, yeah, I got you. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, all thy soul, all thy mind, and all thy strength. But then he said, oh, wait, I'm not done. Then love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. Like, treat people the way you want to be treated. I mean, he said all the commandments, all the things that he gave to Moses was based on those two things. Just do these things. Love God, and then love others. Show God's love to others. And that's where we are not. That's why we don't conform to the world. That's why we have to be transformed from the world. Because the world is not trying to tell us to love each other. It's trying to divide us. You gotta love the world on this side over here, or you gotta love on this side. And even in the church, it gets like that, right? The church is like, well, we get so tied to certain political things or color barriers or just what you say communities that we are just like no, we are denominations. No. We don't do that within Pentecostals over there, right? We're so tied to these other things that we forget the basics of what the faith is, right? And if we do that, we show compassion to each other. Look, the one thing that I love about what happened when you called me and asked me for my opinion is that, you cared enough to want to hear my point of view. Hey, I want to talk to my brother in Christ, right? I want to talk to my brother and I want to find out, what's really going on, right? And that's happening across the country right now as well. Like, that's not being reported as much, but that's happening across the country. Right. But it touched my heart because that's saying like, hey, we're brothers here. We serve the same God. We're under the same faith. You see what I'm saying? We are brothers in Christ. We are one in Christ, right? You know what I'm saying? And that's the important thing. And if you loving me like you love yourself, then yeah, is my brother all right? Like, what's going on, man? How's this affecting? How's this really work? How's this affecting us? How's this affecting you, right? And as we listen to each other, if you have family members in your house right now, I can tell you all don't agree on everything. I mean, it's just, you're not, right? So it's okay to agree to disagree, but understand where each other's coming from. You see what I'm saying? take the time to show grace towards the other person. So as we start thinking about like these people that are out there that are looting and breaking into stuff, it's terrible. And Christians should not be out there. If you are a Christian and you're out there, go ahead and put the stuff back and go on home, right? You need to trust in God for that. But at the same time, there are people out there that they're at their wits' end. There is no money. There is no paycheck. There is no food. They're not going into the store to steal a pair of sneakers for themselves because they want a new pair of kicks. They're going to get as many sneakers as possible so they can go sell them, so they can have some money to provide, right? In most cases, I'm guessing, and I'm guessing, but there's a need. People are needing. People have needs right now.
Something you said the other day when we were talking on that subject was you talked about being driven by hopelessness.
Yeah.
Driven by that fear.
Yeah, because we put our faith. We've gone and put our faith on, like I said, our society has told us that gotta get the house, gotta get the car, go get a second one if you can, go get that boat, pull a second mortgage, and go get a pool in the backyard, right? It's the American dream. Get all these things. What, the Joneses got 2 dogs? We're going to get another dog too, right? So we're getting all these things and living paycheck to paycheck, like they said, like almost 90% of America is like that, living paycheck, like literally living paycheck to paycheck, because we're consumers. We buy more than we need. We're constantly, putting ourselves in debt to just keep going. And we never thought that things like this would happen. Like, you never think that you're going to lose your job. And if you do, you're like, some people are like, hey, I'll lose a job, I'll go get another one. Like, I'm that good, right? But what happens when the pandemic happens and the type of work you do, you can't go get another job. You have to sit at home, right? And now you're the provider, right? And you do what you got to do to make ends meet. I mean, they said David, when he was running from Saul, ate the showbread. People are, in desperate times, you'll do desperate things. And that's, again, not saying that it is right, but trying to paint a picture of compassion, right?
That it's not just sport.
No, yeah, like, hey, let's go see what we can do today. Yeah, and I'm sure there's people out there like that, but I guess what I'm imagining in this sense is that, again, 40 million people unemployed, like that's unheard of, right? And we cannot do. There's a lot of people who can't provide for the family. Like we are extremely blessed, and some of us are extremely blessed where we continue on, our jobs allow for it. But there are other industries where they can't go to work, or if they do, they risk getting sick, or they've lost their breadwinner to COVID, right? So you got to think all these things going on in the middle of a pandemic, and now there's these racial injustices that they're trying to do at the same time. So people are mad. You got people mad that people won't stay home. You got people are mad that they have to stay home. You know what I'm saying? There's nobody happy. I heard T.D. Jakes say when he closed his church, like people were mad that he closed his church, and other people were mad at Joel Osteen because he didn't. And like how do you can't win, right? So you can't please everybody. You must do what you think God wants you to do, and follow that, and take care of your people as a pastor.
Yeah, we had some of those decisions to make.
Yeah, right.
And everybody could see behind us the pews the chairs all spread apart.
Yeah.
For that reason, so that we could make those decisions.
Right.
So I think we'll want to wrap ourselves up here eventually, but kind of response. What do we do to sort of respond? To all of these things, to the injustice, to the hopelessness, to the stuff that's going on. and, you know, and to deal with that person. You know, how do we respond? How do we understand that person? We talked a little bit about that guy not being the enemy.
Yes.
About what this battle is really about. And you talk quite a bit about that.
Yeah, so, so just a little backdrop, history here. For me, as an African American, like I grew up in Arizona, you know, predominantly white area, which is how I grew up, which is what it is. But I had a huge family. My mom is one of 10 kids, and there's like a ton of us cousins, and we were like more like brothers and sisters. So it's a ton of us, right? So I know my identity. I know who I am. Like it's all good. But things that I did not get. My parents got married, and they moved out into another. Both grew up in black neighborhoods in Arizona, and they moved out to the west side, where they were like, we're going to give our kids this great education with all the new schools, the all white neighborhood, away from everything else, right? And things that I did not understand at that time framed a lot of things going forward. And so this is where I'm going with the history. In 1619, that's kind of like that slave ship that comes over and it brings these slaves here to America, right? In 1776, we celebrate our freedom from the British, right? And we're like, yeah, we're free from the British. And the slaves are with their chains on, yeah, we're free from the British. But they're still enslaved, right? You read the Constitution and you're sitting there, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, what is George Washington's slave thinking when they were like, all men are created equal, right? And we, and free, and he's sitting there with his chains on, like, what do you mean? Like, I don't think free means what you think it means, right? So there's that, and then it takes almost 100 years for the slaves to be freed from that, right? That's what was that,
65.
Yeah. In 1860 something.
Into the Civil War.
Right. And they get freed, and they get the right to vote, and it's like, yes, we did it. We're free. This is happening. This is going to be our America now, right? We're going to be just like everybody else. And then the South and the North are making up from that war. They put in the 13th Amendment, which says if you're incarcerated, you can be a slave again. And then America becomes the biggest prison system in the world. Not even we're like 14% of the entire world, and we like have the largest prison system in the entire world. Right? It's just crazy, right? But it was the Jim Crow laws, it was the black codes, it was these things that they could use to jail these black people and make them do labor as slaves again. Right? That's how they kind of got back into it. And the North turned their blind eye to it, like, hey, no see, no foul, right? And so it takes another 100 years, 1968, right, where the civil rights movement, and they're like, yeah, and I wanted everyone to just think about, like, civil rights. Like, they had to write a bill to say civil rights, just to treat somebody civilly, like, hey, we should be, like, I'm a human, you're a human, I breathe, you breathe, we are actually brothers, right? And so they write that happens. Bloodshed has to happen in the Civil War for that to go through, right? For the slaves to be free. Bloodshed has to happen for the civil rights movement to go through. You have these activists, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. You have we lose a president. We use not district attorney. He was Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy was Attorney General. We lose an Attorney General. Like, to the civil, like, these things, bloodshed has to happen for these things to move, right? And then my parents, who were born in that time frame, are moving us out to the west side and all these white neighborhoods, and segregation has just been taken care of for just less than 10 years, right? It's been desegregated for less than 10 years. And so I started dealing with racism in school, elementary school, and I didn't even know. Like, I didn't even know why. Like, I said, like, yeah, you know, you just can't learn this. What? Oh, okay, I can't learn this. Boy, you sure are ugly. What? I guess, okay, maybe I'm ugly. You know, I can't play with you. You dark. Uh, oh, okay. And, you know, so getting it from kids and teachers and stuff like that. And, you know, some good people, very good friends. If I could catch up with some of those guys today, we'd be homies and great. But there were some experiences, right? But it framed me, it framed my opinions of things that when my own kids started coming up, I had to teach them. Like, hey, you get in the classroom, teachers start treating you differently than they're treating other kids. You need to let me know so I can go down there and address that with the teacher. You know, now don't get, and I told Eric, like, don't get me wrong, you're acting a fool in there and I'm going to beat your butt, right? This is what's going to happen. But I need them to know that I understand that these things happen and I got your back. Well, they grew up, they didn't really experience any of that. You know, they didn't, because it wasn't within that time frame that I did. So I'm saying all that to say, like, you know, there's some time that's beginning to heal a lot of things. My daughter talked to me today, and she was telling me, like, you know, she had one of her best friends, a white young girl, and she was like all over her Facebook page, like Black Lives Matter, and she was like, I didn't even know she was like that. Like, but yeah, but people are standing up for each other because they grew up with. There's a lot of kids that are grown up now without the biases that were already attached to them, that were the social norms, right? So the younger kids are a little bit better about it. It's us older ones that are kind of stuck in our ways, right? We really need to use what Christ is talking about, that loving our brother as ourselves, that really that empathy for each other, right? Look, you can tell somebody that they're wrong in two ways. And I tell my wife this all the time. Like, she can tell me I'm wrong and yelling at me and stuff like that, and I am not receiving that. Like, dude, she needs to talk to me later about it, right? We got to talk about it. But she says in love, I'll be like, well, you know, maybe I was wrong. You know, you do things in love, and all of a sudden it's more about, like, how do we move forward? But you do things with you know, locking things away, and you were locked in your own view and in your own opinion, and you miss it. We miss Jesus. This chaos thing that's going on right now is very spiritual. You know what I'm saying? It's very, you know, if you see it on there, you watch it too long, you begin to get emotionally just drained from all of the chaos, right? It's a spiritual thing, right? The fear of all the stuff that's going on, it's very spiritual. You know, that's why when we're talking about, you know, renewing your mind and keeping your mind on Christ, don't forget that, you know, when Jesus when they were taking Jesus and they were beating him and they were taking him to the cross and they did all these things, it was chaos all over the place. The disciples were like, oh my goodness, what's going on? Like, right? Peter's like, hey, I'm not with that guy. And everybody's like, oh, what just happened, right? And the devil's like celebrating, like, I got him. I took down God's man. I took down Jesus. Like, this is ended today, right? He thought he was in control the entire time. And it was God saying, like, no, you causing all this chaos and you celebrating already. So, you know, doing your show already. And God, I'm in control of this. What you think is happening is for your good. It's happening for my good. And see, when it said all things work together for the good, that for those that love God according to his purpose, right? God's plan in the middle of all this chaos, don't focus on the chaos. We have to focus on God, knowing that God is in control. In my spirit, right before COVID broke out, you know, God was just giving me scripture to remind me that he's in control of things. Like, don't be afraid. Don't fear anything. I'm in control. Trust me. Keep your eyes on me. And then you and Pastor Rob were hitting it. Like, the 1 week he hit it, the next week you hit it. And I was like, God. And silly me, I'm like, God, what's happening? Something's going to happen to me? Am I going to get sick? What's going to happen, right? Taking it personally. But I see, looking back at it now, that he was saying, like, look, I'm telling you this now beforehand, as these things come out, that you'll remember that this is what your focus is, right? Don't look at what the world was trying to pull you into, this chaotic state, this state of fear, the state of depression, the state of, it's only me, loneliness, right? That he's still in control. Like, take this time to really focus on God and tell God, like, hey, strengthen my heart, strengthen my faith, right? Strengthen me through this. Bring me those scriptures that remind me that you're in control of things, right? I think that's been my heart's desire through most of these things. I tell my family all the time the same thing. My friends, hey, remember, God's in control. Like, this is, we may think that this is somebody else and all these other things happening, but even if they think they're running things, they're not running things. God is running things. So that's my spiel. I'm sorry, I'm running over here.
You're fine. You're fine. So I think for a couple takeaways to wrap us up, there's the division, the chaos is a spiritual battle.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And that was something that you've said here, and you said to me earlier as well. We wrestle not against flesh and blood.
Yes.
The enemy is not you or me. It's not them. It's not even the guy throwing the bricks.
No, not at all.
Right. That call to love others and consider others' needs above our own, I think is critical. Again, it's something you and I talked about quite a bit. And then this need to have our focus up. This upward focus. I talked about it a couple weeks ago in my message about if we want to see unity amongst the brethren.
Yes. Right.
That our focus has got to be up. You and I can find stuff to disagree about.
Yeah.
We can find stuff to fight about.
Yeah. Especially you're a Volt fan, so yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Not ASU.
That's right.
So there's this decided call for us to have our focus, Godward, toward Him.
Yeah. So I really think that it's been a lot of the things that we worship before COVID got taken away, right? And it really gave us an opportunity to really start to focus on God. I'm a, like I said, diehard sports fan. Like when they took the NCAA tournament away before the tournament started, I was like, what am I gonna do? Like, this is crazy, right? But it gave me a chance to focus more on God, right? So the people that have had concerts to go to and the movies and the music concerts and all these other things that we tend to put ahead of God, this is the time that God's like, hey, I'm taking all your gods away. Come talk to me. Come depend on me. Take all your your concerns to me.
So let's leave it there tonight. Let's say, hey, let's have our focus upward. Let's close us in prayer, and then we'll thank everybody for joining us. I do appreciate everybody who's sat and listened and heard, and I know it makes a difference. We've heard some things that some stuff I hadn't heard before last night. Some realities that I wasn't familiar with, and good reminders. I've heard them on several times, in this time and in the last couple of days as he and I talked about this. He's back to the scripture, back to the scripture, back to the scripture, back to the scripture. Dude can quote a lot of scripture, by the way. That matters. There's where our focus needs to be, and that's what's going to bring us through difficulties, and it's what's going to heal the divisions, heal the problems that are going on, because the problems are real. Even some stuff that maybe some of us didn't know were problems. There's still some very real problems, and that upward focus is going to fix it. Jesus is going to make the difference. So let's pray and call it a night. Father God, thank you. Thank you so much for your reminder to us that our neighbor matters, and that, that the battle going on around us is spiritual. It's not us against them. It's us against the devil. That the battle is in that realm, not in this one. And ultimately, Lord, I thank you for the reminder that we need to love our neighbor well. And I pray for us as individuals, and I pray for us as a church, and everybody who's listening in here this evening. I pray that we will do that we will indeed love each other well, love our neighbor as ourselves. Let that shape us, guide us, and let that be the thing that defines us. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Thank you for your time, brother. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Forget about the social distancing that we didn't do. Sorry about that.
Yeah, social distance failed.